Hello and welcome to this edition of Inside Tacoma. I'm your host, Randall Lewis. Our guest for our conversation today, City Council Member Catherine Ushka. Welcome.
Thank you.
And congratulations, official congratulations on being elected some time ago now.
Thank you very much. It's very exciting.
And you've been attending meetings of the City Council now. You know where everything is and all that, right?
I'm getting there. Yeah.
You're getting there. Okay. Yeah. It's a lot to absorb, but you do come to this from one advantage over some other new council members in that you've been an elected official before. You've been on the school board for 2 terms.
1.5, essentially.
Because there's 6-year terms. So
6-year terms. So yeah, I did. I served 8 years, and I, by city charter, had to resign from there in order to serve in this position.
Right. And was that a tough decision to make? I mean, the school board is a little more hands-on-ish kind of a place than the city council?
It was a very difficult decision. You don't do school board unless you're passionate about it. It's a largely unnoticed position that's about doing good work for the outcomes of kids and families. So if you really like to watch data and see the quality of lives improve, that's fantastic. But you're not getting any credit for it, so it's not a credit position, right?
Right.
And they've done great work, and they have a great team. So walking away from that leadership team and the amazing things that we've done was very difficult, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so you were there when Marilyn Strickland became mayor, and so I want to ask your perspective on this, because one of the things she campaigned on and then implemented when she was elected was to engage the city far more closely and tightly with the school district on a number of issues. That was controversial. I mean, her opponent in that original race didn't agree with that. I'm sure there were people in the school district who were wondering, what the heck is this all about? And it was something that was beginning to happen across the country with cities that don't run school systems, like Tacoma does not run the school system. And there was some, I was watching this, there were some places where school districts were embracing hey, we'd love to have all the allies we can get, and others places where, ooh, we don't know what's going on here. How was this received at the Tacoma Public Schools when the mayor started talking about that?
So I wasn't on the board yet, but I was civically involved, engaged in schools and the levies and things like that. And I actually remember the moment that I heard that. And I thought, gosh, if she's going to do this, I'm going to hold her accountable to it, because nationwide it was kind of a new calling card for political diatribe, right? And so I did very much watch her and pay attention to what she was doing, and she did a good job, right? Because for her, for a city that does not run the schools, it's a fine line to get involved with education but not step on the toes of the people that are in charge of education. Yeah. And
to make sure that what you're doing, you engage those folks, and which she did. I mean, when you did come on the board, I'm sure you met with her and heard about the kinds of things that she had in mind.
Yeah, she had a mayor's commission on education. You know, and you go back to 2009, 2008, that's kind of where you're looking at right now. We didn't have Tacoma 360, it was just developing. And I don't know if you remember that, but that was a agreement between the school district, the parks, and the city, right, that ended up morphing into the foundation for Tacoma Public Schools, and really looking at making sure that resources that went to schools that were frequently receiving funds from the city as well as not-for-profits were equitably distributed throughout the city. Because otherwise what would happen is you'd have a lot of really great programs and they'd be 1 and 2 schools, and then you had 10 schools that had no resources whatsoever, right? So that was the beginning of that concept. That goes back to before that. Get me talking about education, I can talk all day. There was an education summit that actually Victoria Woodards and Kurt Miller put together a few years before that, and probably 300 people spent a weekend at Stadium High School talking about what's the one thing that we could do. And the one thing that came out of that was build a mentorship program for middle school students, starting with those most at risk, right? Because that's where kids dropped off the most. And that became, how do we better distribute resources? That became the beginning of transformation that brought us from 55% graduation rates in 2009 to 86.1% this past year, with a lot in between.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's been activity and linking between the school district, the park district, and the city of Tacoma for many, many, many years. I mean, there's a committee called the Joint Municipal Action Committee that's met for as long as I've worked for the city of Tacoma, which is going like on 27 years now. And most of the time that was focused on kind of peripheral stuff, though. I mean, there was a time when the city ran an evening schools program, and the school district did, and the park district did, and everybody kind of competed with each other, and I think we finally sorted that out. There was a thing about, Park District and School District both own land with playgrounds, and people sorted out how to make those things work better for the public that pays for all of them. So cooperation on physical stuff has been around for a very long time, but this was something new in terms of talking about the actual mission of the school district, which is educating kids and the outcomes that come along and how that affects things like the city's trying to do in terms of economic development and all of the other kinds of things that the city wants to do, are affected by the product that the Tacoma Public Schools puts out.
Right, and I hate to refer to students as products, but in fact, when organizations
wasn't my best choice of words.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
When businesses are looking to invest, they are looking at what's the workforce, right? And part of what they're looking at is what is that secondary education level, what is that high school graduation level, what is post-secondary training looking like, right? And it's been fairly low for Tacoma, and it's one of the reasons why I ran for school board, because I was really cognizant of the fact that if we can build that from the school district perspective, even where you're going to buy your house, the quality of the schools makes a difference, right? So that was part of it. Now, when you're talking about everybody running evening courses, that predates me. I can tell you that there's been a lot more collaboration. I know that parks and schools would alternate, park usage or place usage. Now they have it down to a science. The amount of work that they do in partnership for students and families, because neither one can grant the other a tax dollar for. You can't give it away, but you can partner with it. So I don't really know how they do it, but the way I imagine it is they have this vast spreadsheet that talks about who's using which park, which after-school programs where, but they do the dollar value because they have to come out at the end and make sure that it's equitable. And the last I checked at the end of the year, they end up being within about $200 of value. That's leveraging assets, right?
Right.
One of the things that we saw come out of that was the community center that we're seeing come out of that.
Right, the Eastside.
The Eastside Community Center that will open fall of this year. Back in the last recession, we saw a lot of things leave District 4. The Boys and Girls Club closed. They closed a library. They closed a school. And that's a very difficult impact on a district that's both very diverse and more economically challenged than really most of the rest of the county, let alone the city. So this has been a turning point that starts bringing that back. The community center, if you're not familiar with it, and I know you are, but I'm going to tell you anyway, is a partnership of the Billy Ray Foundation, and that was Billy Ray's vision. I'm happy to talk about that, and the city and the school district and the parks and the Boys and Girls Club. And it's, I want to say I'm going to get either my square feet or my millions mixed up, but it's either no, I'm not. It's a 60,000 square foot building and a $30 million project that will serve the residents of the East Side and the broader regional area for years to come. And it's on the site of First Creek Middle School down there at 56th and Portland Avenue. And there's a long-term vision for Swan Creek to be more developed into a destination park like Point Defiance. They already have mountain biking trails back there. And there's a rugby club down at Portland Avenue, which is an issue that needs to be addressed, and I know that the Parks is working on in terms of moving that center. But it becomes a game changer, because if you grew up on the East Side any time in the last 30 years, if you didn't go to the Boys and Girls Club, there wasn't really any place to hang out. Right. And if you're a community member, what do you do when you're going to meet with a neighbor? You go to a coffee shop, right? Well, we don't have any coffee shops in District 4. We're going to get a Starbucks in the coming year. They've pulled permits for G Street and Lincoln Ave, which is exciting. Metronome Coffee is the person who contracted with Parks to be a coffee shop inside the community center. But why is that important? It's important because when neighbors can come together in a
what do they do at Starbucks? Yes.
For something fun, you get further than when you can't. And if you're in an environment that people are more economically challenged, well, time is money. You probably have less time. So it's very relevant in the long-term, improvement of an area or the quality of life that one lives.
Plus, I think I've mentioned this with your predecessor, Councilmember Marty Campbell, but I think it's worth mentioning again because it's remarkable about the Eastside Community Center. Because if you've been a long-time person in government, government does good things, but government has its processes and its procedures, and government can be very slow and methodical and frustrate people. But the Eastside Community Center went from conception to groundbreaking to opening faster than any kind of public project like it that I have ever seen. I remember former Councilmember Walker Lee talking about how we closed people's pool the week she became on the city council, and it took until after she left city council 8 years later before it reopened. And that was just to reopen an existing facility.
Right.
Building something that didn't even exist in a concept and then opening it in just a handful of years, 5 years or so, that this has happened is remarkable testament to the spirit of the citizens who actually led the effort and convinced any number of governments that this was the right thing to do. And then the way those governments made their processes work a little faster than they normally did too.
Absolutely. I think that there was, it feels like there was an alignment of stars. I mean, I remember when I first met Celicia and heard the story of her son asking, why don't we have a community center, right? And that story was very compelling for anybody that could to start with yes, right? And when you have policymakers across municipal entities telling each other and their staff that your role is to get to yes, be creative, be innovative, tell us what you need, get to yes. That's what can happen.
Yeah. And it's a good lesson. I hope we remember it in the future when there's other projects that government can actually work like that. It doesn't always, but it can when it needs to. So
absolutely, yeah.
So other than the history you bring to the city council race and being on the school board all the time, what else drove you to wanting to become a city council member and now suddenly set a focus on graduation rates, worry about potholes and police response times and fire station openings and all that kind of stuff that you're going to have to deal with now?
Well, I've lived in District 4 for nearly 20 years. It's where I raised my family. And running for school district was really about being worried about the whole city, right? And what is that connectivity of the economic edge? I am very excited to serve District 4 because it's kind of like coming home. I get to focus on my neighbors and the things that are very dear to my heart. Education clearly was as well, but when you're serving a whole city, you get less time to focus on the issues that affect our daily quality of life. And they are things like potholes or dumped garbage or levels of crime. And if you can't, if you have the best school district in the world, if you have every job you could ever want, but you're still afraid to walk out at night, or it's covered with trash when you go here and there, it doesn't make a difference. So those things have to be whole. And again, I've also mentioned that District 4 is one of the more economically challenged and diverse communities in our area, and I think it's really important that we have a strong advocate. Historically, and I'm going to go back, and typical of any urban environment, areas like East and South End Tacoma and south of I-5 are largely ignored in urban areas, and therefore they don't make progress, they get worse. So if you don't have strong advocacy that understands and values the diversity that's there, you don't make progress. So that's part of what got me wanting to run. Issues that are important in that level are things like homelessness and affordable housing. And I want to talk about that in a continuum because I think it's everything from being able to pay next month's rent to being able to retire in the same community. It's things like making sure that our kids that graduate from high school can get the post-secondary education they need to find a job that's either in or commuting distance to Tacoma, and then they can afford to buy a house in Tacoma to live and grow, right? Because what builds great neighborhoods is those generational investments, right? What builds families is those generational investments. And if you're always going from month to month, you never can do that. There are things that city policy can do in collaboration with other municipal entities to help make that happen. And that's what I look forward to doing. Okay.
And there is going to be some substantial public investment in your district over the next few years. I mean, one of the lesser commented on parts of the Sound Transit 3 initiative that was approved by the voters in Tacoma, along with most of the people in the region last year or 2 years ago, was bus rapid transit along the length of Pacific Avenue right through your district, which will involve a kind of a high-speed street-bound transportation system, which will involve probably some decisions regarding zoning, regarding where the stations are. This isn't regular, like normal Pierce Transit service that stops every 2 blocks. This is something that stops less frequently than that, but moves faster when it's running. I don't remember the exact cost of this project, but it's a substantial investment in transportation infrastructure within your district.
Absolutely, and making sure that those stops and that those investments are things that we do in collaboration with our neighbors that build and propel greater investment is going to be very important. It's very possible for something like that to exist and for everybody to drive through District 4 and never stop, and for it not to serve our community as well. So working to make sure that it does that and it enhances the quality of life, that there's connectivity across the district to access that rapid bus is going to be very important. So I look forward to doing that as well. I would love us to, as a city, to think more collaboratively about transit-oriented development, because it'll both address affordable housing, partly because if you can get good transit-oriented development, then you can get from wherever you live to public transit, to work, to grocery stores, etc., and you don't need a car. Think about how much more money you would have in your pocket if you didn't have to have a car. And in fact, we're still largely car-bound, which is ironic that you would have a district that's got more economic challenge, and then you have more investment that it takes to get from point A to point B. But that is the nature of it. So rapid transit is an excellent opportunity for investment. There's a few other things that are there that it's going to be important to keep going. I already mentioned the community center. You're familiar with the investment in the Lincoln Revitalization Project. To make a more walkable, livable community there. We've seen a couple new businesses come in there already, so that's exciting. And I know that they're trying to do some placemaking activity down on Yakima that's more like the lower end of Pacific Ave. I don't know a lot of detail about that yet, but I'll be excited to see the specifics there. And I mentioned the Starbucks coming in. So you increase that foot traffic, and you increase the safety and vibrancy of the community. You just do. I've actually, now we're in a place that you can go down to the Lincoln District and have a great lunch and do a little shopping, maybe stop by the hardware store, get a cup of coffee and go home. I've lived there for 20 years. That's never been the case. So that's very exciting. The people that live in District 4 are largely people that have strong values and opinions and don't have an opportunity to interact with each other. So what are the unknown assets that come from that when people can collaborate more? The other investments besides that in the community center, I know that the Puyallup Tribe is doing a lot of work on what I'm going to reference as an entertainment complex down on Lower Portland Avenue, and seeing how that develops and increases traffic and beautification on that business district area is going to be a wonderful thing as well. It's also a largely underserved area. You may have heard that there are people that are very concerned because as we're building the new community center, Parks therefore doesn't want to run 2 community centers. So working now to try and find partners that might take over running that community center to serve that area of Portland
Avenue.
Right, because bus transportation is difficult. So there's things like that to be mitigated and worked on. That whole area too also represents a food desert. So there's some good discussion already in play about food innovation districts. And I can't speak in great detail about that because I'm not an expert on it yet, but hopefully by next time we talk I will be. But that's everything from making sure that communities can create farm-based business in an urban environment to ensuring that there's fresh and healthy food available and accessible, which are really exciting things. One of the things that compelled me to run, or that I noticed a lot when I was running, is where I live is right near the entrance to Salishan, which is of course another public-private investment that's pretty intense. Is on a Saturday you come to the corner of Portland and 40th, and somebody will get off the bus, and what they've got is a cart full of great big dry good boxes from Costco. Now, that doesn't seem like a big deal perhaps, but I know that it took them 3 buses to get there, and now they've pretty much spent their entire Saturday getting some basics to get them through for a few weeks at Costco.
Wow.
Right. So when I talk to people across the city, what they're doing on Saturdays, frequently, or if not inside the 4th District, and also in the 4th District, but you're looking at spending time with your grandchildren, you're running a soccer league, maybe you're reading your favorite book or doing some gardening. You're not spending all of your free time on survival. Right. So I really want to work on policies so that people ask me what a success looks like. Success looks like time with our families.
Okay. And not having to load big Costco boxes on a bus would be a good thing too.
Getting well beyond survival, right? The district also has long had issues with blight and issues like that. And we have a tremendous community full of Safe Streets groups that will get together and do community cleanups and find new libraries or start a drive for umbrellas so that kids standing on bus stops don't get wet. All of that's fabulous. But what if we could take all of that energy and invest it into things that propel a higher quality of life instead of, again, clean it up again?
Okay. Well, you mentioned the Puyallup Tribe, and any discussion with the District 4 representative is not going to be complete without pointing out that that is one of the assets of your district is the Puyallup Tribe. The large portion of their own property ownership, their historical area is that district, and they are an economic force within that district as well. Do you have relationships with tribal leadership, or are you looking forward to establishing those kinds of things so that you can have ongoing conversations with them?
I've had some kind of introductory relationship building, if that makes any sense, and I'm looking forward to broadening that. I think that District 4 and the tribe are natural partners. There's a lot of tribal land throughout District 4 that's been granted back to them over the years. And I think that's important. I think that something that's always surprised me is that as you drive through that area, if you don't know it, there's not a lot of significant identification that that's a tribe. And I would love to see us as a city collaborate on identifying and celebrating that cultural identity that's there, and also building the partnerships related with that.
Okay. The issues that they're involved with tend to also then spill over into other parts of the other districts, other council members' districts. District 2, for example, the port area is something that certainly the tribe has some historical ownerships in and some ongoing interests. And those are all also ongoing discussions that the city council is going to be having over this year regarding planning for the Tide Flats area and all of the kinds of things that go on with that.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about, and I always ask newly elected council members this question, so I want to not forget to do this. When you were doorbelling and walking through your district, what was it that people told you they wanted you to do when you were elected city council member? What was it? Did anything come up that surprised you in those conversations?
So I've doorbelled the district before, because remember I've run for office twice before. Right. And I think that what surprised me is that there was more conversation about wanting improvements in traffic, concerns about lowering utility rates or making sure that they don't increase. And while crime and blight are still issues, they weren't always the highest. Block by block, it changed. Closer to the county line, that quality of life diminishes just because there's I don't know all the reasons why. It's something I want to address. So that surprised me. People want to be able to live, work, and play and enjoy where they live. And there's more of a sense in my mind and the reflection of what I heard of people seeing it as attainable and feeling like they have a right to strive for that, which is a turning point, if that makes any sense, versus not listening at all or not being engaged because they don't have any faith in the system. And I'm not saying that they suddenly have everybody has a tremendous faith in the system, but seeing some results come through does make a difference, making sure that people are heard. There are some significant issues neighborhood to neighborhood that you hear door to door that I'll have an opportunity to address. Those are things like, do we want another business district down on 56th Street? There are some very active members down there at that point. There are also things like the methadone clinic that's at the health department up there on D Street. Interestingly enough, they have 2 licenses and can serve up to 1,000 people a day. And I think that I have great empathy for people that suffer from addiction, and I think that we lack resources as a community to help people in that situation. At the same time, I believe that is one of the only areas in the county that provides this service. And even if only 2% of 1,000 people are a problem or an impact on a neighborhood, that's a significant impact. So being able to address and solve those issues are going to be important. A lot of concerns about individuals who are homeless impacting the community. There's a lot more open space on the east side than there is in the south end than there is in lots of other areas of the city. And so it's pretty easy to all of a sudden have a tent sitting next to a community garden. And who do you find to collaborate to make sure that's addressed and also be humane about it? With the work that the city is doing on addressing homelessness further down on Portland Ave, I think, or Puyallup Ave, right?
Puyallup, yeah.
I will keep a careful watch because I'm concerned that now everybody in the county that has a need is going to come right to downtown Tacoma, and they're going to come through District 4 because it's the most logical route, and they're going to stop along the way. And we've had a history of kind of going 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, and I want to find ways to address that that's effective and humane and kind of goes to root cause analysis, so we're not just cleaning up and waiting and then cleaning up again, but actually solving the issue, not just for District 4, but for the region. National media is now talking about the homeless crisis across the Pacific Coast. So I think it's time that we really need to look at what are the historical impacts of policy and the recessions and the lack of reemployment, and what do we do to change that? Because if we do not, it's not going to get better. Problems don't just go away, right?
Right.
And these problems are individuals who have lives and families who could be increasing the value of all of our lives. Now, I do understand that there's a group of people that are kind of chronically homeless, and I think that historically, federally and locally, there's been a reduction in services that provide long-term housing for people with specific needs, and a lot of it's been well-intended. I did the first 10 years of my career working with people with disabilities in a residential environment, and those were back in the years when they were finally moving people out of institutions. It was deinstitutionalization and moving people into more group home kind of facilities. Now, these are great things, they really are, and then moving them into apartments. The challenge is that they can never go back. So if you have somebody in an apartment setting and now you've gotten rid of those long-term housing options, and something happens, people are stuck. So I think that probably contributes to what we're seeing. I don't know, because I haven't had a chance to go through the detailed research it's going to take to understand how we got there, so we can understand how not to be there anymore.
All right. And with that, we are out of time.
Oh, thank you.
So you're going to be back a few times here over the next few years. We'll see how all of these issues and your learning changes as you get more familiar with all of those things that you're talking about today, because they're all ongoing issues that we'll have to see has to deal with. So, but thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Our guest has been City Council member Catherine Ushka. We look forward to seeing you next time here on Inside Tacoma.